welcome to The Steep. My name is Lacey Spate, and what we did is we surveyed the youth of today, and we asked them what questions they had about God and the Bible, and we're taking the top 5 questions, and we're going to try to answer them using our Bibles, and we're going to do it all over a cup of tea, and the tea I am drinking today is wild berry tea, and I think it's just like a mixture of different fruits. I don't know, it's really good. I have some sugar in it, and it's really awesome. Anyway, so our guest for today is Dr. Tim Alsup. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful.
What tea are you drinking?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for letting me come hang out. I have raspberry tea. I did not do sugar. Lacey offered me sugar, but I did not do sugar. And it's good. I like it. I told her I'm not convinced wild berry is a real thing, but I like raspberry and it tastes good.
Well, that's
Thanks
good.
for the tea.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
I am the preaching minister here at the Great Oaks Church of Christ. I've been here for almost 20 years. Watched Lacey grow up, which has been fun. She's been great. Have 3 kids, a 17-year-old boy, a 14-year-old boy, and an 11-year-old girl. So we're very busy chasing kids around, all their different stuff.
Yep.
And love what I do, working in ministry with church.
Well, that's good. Nice. Thank you, Tim. So our question for today is evangelism, why and how. So a lot of our questions were asking us to talk, survey responses were asking us to talk about evangelism. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Tim, my first question for you today is, why do we evangelize?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised it's on the list. You know, you were just telling me how you got these things. This is something everybody is concerned about in our culture. And so people are wondering how you do this. We evangelize, even if it's difficult, because this is the most important thing. And Jesus said very clearly in Matthew 16:26 that if you gain the whole world but lose your soul, what have you gained? And that's hard to argue with when you think about it. The whole reason we're here, the only thing that's going to matter is our relationship with God. And so evangelism means to share the good news and the good news of the gospel about the message of Jesus. So the reason we share the message of Jesus, our soul is what matters most. Our relationship with God is what matters most. And then on top of that, God has given us that charge. You know, he cares about our faith and our soul, and he's told the whole church to take the gospel to all creation. Matthew 28:18-20. Make disciples of all the nations. So God thinks it's important. It's important, most important part of our life. We should share it with others.
Yeah. And one thing I remember that they would say, like, Chase would say this a lot at camp and at our, we did our Lift retreat for the first time ever this year, and we did it's where we did a little road trip and had little stops where people would speak to us. And one of the main things I remember him saying was, "Disciples make more disciples." I really like that, and I think that's very important. So if we're followers of Jesus, we're commanded to go out there, like you said, Matthew 28:18-20.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it, because that's part of our mission as Christians. That's part of our identity as Christians. And so if we can remind people of that. Now, people get nervous about it because sometimes people think, well, I've got to be Paul. Not everybody's Paul, but everyone's supposed to be part of that mission in some way, whatever that way is.
Yeah, I know I sure ain't Paul.
Join the club. There was only one Paul. He was uniquely gifted to do what he did.
Oh, yeah. So our next question is, what are some good ways that we can bring up faith in our day-to-day?
So I believe it's going to happen organically if we are Christians. Like, if we are really living like Jesus Christ, it will be different and people will notice. There's a lot of fake faith in our culture. In fact, one of the things people who are not Christians consistently say about Christians is they feel like they're all hypocrites. And so if we are a genuine Christian, it will come up. And so day to day, if we'll just keep our eyes open for times when faith issues come up and just be ready to have the conversation. That's one thing you find in a lot of books on evangelism. They really encourage us just to have conversations with people. People don't always want like a sermon. They may not want you to be preaching. You can't always say, hey, give me 10 minutes to tell you some things about Jesus. But things will come up and people will talk to you. So if we can just have normal conversation stuff. In fact, I mean, for you, you're a senior in high school. Does faith stuff come up every now and then with people? I assume it does.
Yeah, less than you probably would expect.
Really?
Because, well, the way it comes up at my school is usually when you're spending a lot of personal time with a person, which is not very often because a lot of our teachers, especially this year for some reason, are switching us around. They're not letting us sit in the same spots.
Okay.
Um, they move us around. And even when we're in class, we're not talking to each other. We're paying attention, especially since this is our senior year. All the classes we're taking this year, most of us need to graduate or to get college credit. Um, the most the most that I have like talked to people have been when I'm like hanging out with them over summer, or if I'm having lunch with them. Maybe I remember throughout my high school career, freshman year had the most people asking me because my now best friend, she the first thing she asked me was, "Hey, do you want to have a Bible study?" Which was really fun. And we went to the library and did a Bible study. But
That's the
like
first thing she asked you?
well, real conversation, yeah. I think the first thing she asked me was, "What book are you looking for?" Because we were in the library. But like in class, after we had like kind of talked to each other a couple more hours, she's like, the first time we hung out was a Bible study, and that was actually really
That
fun.
is cool.
That was really cool. But when it comes to like as we get older, right? We were 14, then coming just out of middle school. But and we at my high school we're separated, so we have a freshman academy, and so we were separated. But like when you're in like the huge high school, it comes up less and less.
Mm,
I know that the most times it's come up while I've been like in the main school, it's mainly been on like my team. I
okay.
bowl for the school. I'm on the bowling team. One of my teammates came to church with me last night, Wednesday night, and as of the time we're recording this, and so that's mainly when it comes up, and a lot of times people are scared to ask.
Mm,
I found that in my school, people are. This is something we'll probably talk a little bit more about later, but with my generation, people are very scared to ask and talk about things. I'm not going to disclude myself from that. I
right.
think that I can be scared too because people get so offended. And people are scared that they're going to offend somebody or offend you by asking, um, or they just um, are dealing with their own personal problems, so they don't want to ask things like that. So sometimes I'll start a conversation like, "Hey, what do you believe about your faith?" I remember last year in my Spanish class, to my Spanish teachers, many annoyances when we were speaking in English and not in Spanish. It was very funny.
I had those Spanish teachers too. Yep.
Yeah, we would. I remember would talk about our faith, and one of the girls would be like, I showed her this salvation study I did a while back. I think I told you about that, where I used this Bible right here because
Mhm.
it has like the big, I think it's a Thompson index. I don't
Okay.
remember, but it has this huge index where it has every word in it has every single Bible verse for it. I used that and AI and Google to find every single Bible verse I could about salvation, and then I made a chart saying, what does the Bible say we have to do to be saved? And when I showed it to her, she's like, wait, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by, I think she said, what do you mean by we can't be saved by our faith alone? And I'm like, well, the book of James says it word for word. I can show it to you. And I pulled up the verse and I showed her on that Bible on my laptop. But that's mainly where all of that comes from. People are more willing to talk about it when you let them know that you're willing to talk about it too, I think, in my school.
Makes
And it's
sense.
still terrifying.
That makes sense. Well, so some of the ones you said, so sometimes people ask you because you're different, so it comes up. Sounds like you asked people sometimes, and that's a great way to do it, just asking questions. I mean, I think my experience is most people, when faith stuff just sort of comes up, they're fine to talk, they're fine to answer a question. Like if you just show interest in people, hey, do you go to church anywhere? Are you a Christian? Have you thought about it? Like I think people are great with those types of questions. And then like day to day stuff too. I think sometimes if you're just talking about life with people, like bad stuff will come up, and just letting people know you'll pray for them. I mean that tells them something about your faith, and maybe even ask right there, do you have a faith background? Do you have a church family? So even just like the difficulties of life give day to day opportunities to have the conversation. So sometimes we just need to tell ourselves, I'm not going to run from the conversation when it comes up. You know, when it happens, I'm not going to be scared of it. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to wish you'd said something different every time. That's going to happen. But it plants seeds in people. So that's one great day to day thing. Is just to think, if the conversation comes up, I'm going to stay in it. And we're going to talk about praying for you, or talk about God, or invite you to church, or whatever. And I would, one more thing on that, and I'll shut up. Um,
No, you can talk as much as you need to.
I would in conversations, and again, it's conversation. You're asking their opinion, you're listening to them, you're not preaching at people, you're just talking. I always try to tell myself, I try to encourage the next step, like whatever I think the next step in their faith is, as we're just talking. And it's often, hey, you ought to come to church with us sometime. Like I think you'd really enjoy coming. We have a family and friends day coming up, or a Wednesday for our teen group coming up. You ought to come to that. Or maybe it's something like, I hope you'll think about becoming a Christian. If you ever want to talk about it, let me know. Just something I try to think, okay, as we've talked, what's the next thing I would like to encourage? And God will keep working their life, even if I never see him again. God will keep working. But day to day, just being ready to have conversations, I think, is a really big deal.
Yeah, and I like how you said that we aren't that we're it's a discussion, that we're not preaching at people, because I know I struggle with that. I
We all do. There's a lot we want
yeah.
to say, right?
Yeah, you know me. You've known me for how many years? You know I like to preach at people.
But you care. Like it's
Yeah.
good that
Yeah.
you care. Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of the times I found that like when I preach at people, they get mad at me, and that it's valid. It's valid that they're getting mad at me. I don't mean to be disrespectful. It just kind of happens. But
Well, that's the good thing about the next step deal. Like it because you care and I care. We're Christians. Like we know how serious it is. But people often change slowly. And so they're not always ready for us to tell them everything we know. There was a guy, I tell people this story. There was a guy I worked with when I was in college age, and I worked at a oil change place in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And as we got near the end of the summer, I was about to transfer to go to Freed Hardeman, so I wasn't going to see him anymore. And I thought, we talked about faith some through the summer because he knew I was transferring to become a preacher. And so his name was John. I said, John, why don't we sit down and have a Bible study? And for the next hour and a half, when we sat down, he was like, yeah, great, let's do it. I think I told him everything I knew about Christianity in that hour and a half. And you can imagine, his eyes are glazed over by the end because it's just way too much. I'm trying to take him from like 0 to 100 in one conversation. And people need to change slowly. Like they think about it. What I wish I had done was had a Bible study and just done a starting point Bible study. What do we think about the Bible? Um, Maybe invite him to church. Just one step at a time instead of trying to do it all. So when you're preaching to people, it's because you care. It's because you want them to be part of it. But sometimes if we can rein ourselves back and say, all right, where you at? Tell me where you're at, and let me just encourage the next step. Day to day, that's a really good way to help people draw closer to Jesus.
yeah, it's very true. So, our next question, our next question is, how do we evangelize to people who we are close to compared to like people we maybe don't know as well, but like this guy, this might be like our only chance to talk to this person.
Right. Well, if we think it's the only chance, like the person you sit next to on an airplane or something, I still think conversation and asking, encouraging the next step is the way to do it. Because here's what I try to tell myself, and I think it's true: God will keep working in their life even after I'm gone, and that takes some of the pressure off. Like I'm not the only option this person will ever have to follow the Lord. They got to make that decision. It's not just me. There were people in the Bible who were ready to follow God in one conversation. The Ethiopian eunuch, God had prepared this perfect moment where God's already been working in his life and he's reading his Bible and he sends Philip up to meet him. And so God had prepared that in a lot of the Jews, especially in the first century. But people in America are usually not one conversation away. And so I think it's still, you're having a conversation and you just encourage the next step and then put them on your prayer list. Pray that God will keep working in their life. Now, with somebody close to you, I think it's the same thing, but you just got to be patient, and patience is hard because again, we care, like we feel the urgency of this. But if you're the average non-Christian in America, you may be skeptical of Christians. So it may take a while for you to trust this Christian you're talking to. That's probably not going to happen in one conversation. You probably don't know as much about the Bible, so it's going to take time to learn. So you got receptivity. It's going to take a while. You have knowledge. It's going to take a while. I just think you have to be patient with people, even in your life. So I think it's the same principle. What's the next step I can encourage? And there's a book I've got in my office, a couple of them, that study how long it took people to become Christians in our culture. And it is usually a longer process in our culture. There's There's one I was just looking at this afternoon, and over 50% of the new Christians, from the time they met the Christian that was an encouragement to their faith, it was over a year. I think his number was 52%, something like that. So most people, it's not the first conversation. Most people, it's going to be a process of thinking and learning and growing. Um, and even people in your life, you just got to be patient with them. Keep encouraging, but be patient with them.
Yeah.
And this may have been part of your question too. I don't know if it was or not. But sometimes it can be hard if you're too close to someone to say too much. Like family, sometimes that comes up with like family members and stuff. And again, that's the advantage of inviting someone to meet your church family because it's not just you.
And also, if we look at like, well, one thing I was wondering about this too is I know with a lot of the classes that I've taken at like Horizons, even here, about evangelism, they've always, you know, said a lot of what you're saying with the personal conversation. But I wanted to also ask, I mean, like Paul would like preach to the masses from the synagogue, like, and it worked for him. Do you think it like that could still work for us, or do you think like our world has gotten too far from that mindset?
I think it depends on your culture. Our culture doesn't always receive that real well. If you just went out on the corner and started shouting at everybody, we used to take mission trips to Jamaica when I was in high school, and they would do that. They would take a microphone and a speaker and just go out in the villages and start preaching, and people would listen to it. So it probably depends on your culture. In our culture, that's probably not as accepted. But don't miss that, Paul also, he was big on conversation. So like Acts 17, for example, by the end of the chapter, he's preaching at the Areopagus to a group of people. But his ministry in Athens started not with preaching, but with conversation. Like in verses 16 and 17, he just goes into the marketplace and just starts talking with whoever's present and in the synagogues. He would do it in synagogues everywhere he went. He would go in, and in the synagogue, even there, I think it's Acts 13 and 14, he goes in and he just sits down in the synagogue, and they come up and ask him, hey, do you have anything you'd like to say? We hear you're from Jerusalem or whatever. And so then he gets up and talks about Jesus. So even there, it wasn't like he was just walking in and shouting at people. Like he would go in and have conversation with people. So I don't think personally that going out in the corner and shouting at people is very effective in our culture right now. But I do think conversation, both then and now, is effective.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and then this is Paul. He's talking to the Corinthians, and he's telling them how he evangelized to people using that conversation that you were talking about. And it says, starting with verse 19. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law towards God, but under law towards Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be a partaker of it with you. And I really like that passage because it tells us that Paul did everything. He got within all crowds that he could. Now it says in that verse, of course, like not that he went without, he didn't stop following God's law, right? He still, that he didn't sin in this process, but he still like made sure that he appeared in certain ways to certain people so that they would listen to him, be more willing to listen to him. And I think that's a lot of like, we could think about that, right? We could use maybe their terms of slang and language, or we could have the energy of that they have. We could present the energy that they present, and pull off the vibe that they have, and that would also like in this passage help us to evangelize to them.
I like what you said about how Paul was talking with all different types of crowds in that section. Paul was not too cool to talk to anybody, and that's something we can fall into, especially as teenagers. You can feel like people sometimes worry about, I don't want to talk to these people. They might think I'm not cool. I don't want to talk to this group. Paul was going to show love to everybody he met, and in context, that passage too, I like what you said. It wasn't that Paul sinned, and it wasn't that he changed who he was, but he, in context, talking about idols' meat and whether you could eat idols' meat. And Paul's saying, I didn't intentionally try to offend anybody. So if I'm with a Jew, and I know it's that you don't have to follow the Old Testament diet laws, I'm not going to eat pork right in front of a Jew and just offend them and put a wall up between them and the gospel. So Paul was thinking about the person he's with. I don't want to offend this person, but I want to share the gospel in a way that they'll see its goodness, even if I know it's not wrong in a way that they might think it's wrong. So I do like that. Paul was willing to talk to everybody. He was thinking about where they were coming from, and you could tell in that passage too, like it's his life. Like his life is sharing the gospel with people, which is so encouraging.
And that's something that we need to strive for too. That needs to be our life too. And so our next question is, what are like some other good ways that we can evangelize to people, just in general?
Yeah. So the people who study our culture say that people come to Christ usually it's relationship oriented and it takes time. So we mentioned patience a couple times already. But the numbers say about 70% of people who become Christians came through a relationship. Now that does tell you there are still 30% who are looking, who are searching and just sort of looking on their own. So it's still good to put things online and send out flyers and all that stuff. But 70% of people have been coming to Jesus through a relationship. So it's going to be a friendship. And so building relationships with people is a big deal. Just getting to know people. Sometimes Christians struggle with being friends with non-Christians. But those are the pathways that people come to Jesus. So if we can just go get coffee with people and just talk with people and get to know people, that provides pathways. And we do that sincerely because we care about them, even if they never become Christians. Like you want to show love to people, whether they ever become Christians. So you want to build relationships with people. And then I think it's that same principle. What's the next step? What's the next step for this person? And just patiently keep encouraging them. Another thing people emphasize today is that evangelism is not just a one person thing, that it is an all of us thing. And I think you find that in Scripture, that Jesus says in places like John 13:34 and 35, if you all show love for each other, people will know you're my disciples. Like there's an evangelistic element when we are a certain type of people. And so the church evangelizes together. That some people are inviting and some people are greeting people when they come and some people are having Bible studies with people and some people are serving in ways that show God's love. So like the church doing what the church does together helps bring people to Jesus too. So it's not just you, it's not just me. It is all of us doing different things that bring people to Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that on that you mentioned how we always want to show love to one another, and I have another passage that I want to read that's about that. This is my favorite love passage.
Okay.
It's also a song lyric. It's one of our songs that's based off of it. It's First John, chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Yeah, and it says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love." But the passage is like so important because it reminds us that even when we find it hard to love people, when like when we disagree with people, we have to show them that love, because if we don't, then like it says, who those who do not love do not know God. We don't know God, and that's a problem, right? So we need to be able to show that love. And another one is 1 Peter 3:15, which says that we need to have meekness, and some translation I think say gentleness whenever we share the word. So when we share, we need to make sure that we're loving one another, that we're being meek and gentle, because that's what we're called to do, right? That's what. So back to that. With that, it also points to the no preaching at people thing too, like we were talking about earlier. We need to have that love and that meekness in order to effectively share the word.
Yeah, there's a book called Unchristian that studied non-Christians and what they thought about Christians. And one of the big things they came away with was most non-Christians in America are not against Christianity. they feel like they haven't seen real Christians in their life. And so that's an open door if we will be real Christians. And so loving people like you're talking about. Like if you just love people, just show people you care about them, that will open doors for evangelism. And also like how you mentioned like the way we talk to people is a big deal. Like you've probably seen, we've all seen, where you're having a conversation with someone about faith stuff and it gets heated and it goes in a direction it shouldn't if you're really trying to honor God. Um, and so if you can keep conversations in a way that you show love to people, like that's a big deal too. So one thing that really leads to evangelism is just really loving people the way God wants us to.
Amen to that. um. All right. So our next question, I think it is our last one for today. Is how do we deal with rejection when it comes to evangelism?
Good question. Um, well, rejection is going to happen in evangelism. So we need to sort of accept that that's part of it. Jesus himself was rejected by people. And it's crazy to us that Jesus could look at someone like the rich young ruler and say, "Follow me," and him say no. But people rejected Jesus. In John 6, he's talking about how important it is to receive his blood for salvation, and people just start leaving. And so Jesus faced rejection. Paul faced rejection when he preaches in Athens at the end of his sermon that we all acknowledge is a great sermon. Only a few people listened, and the rest said no. Some of them sort of mocked him. So rejection will happen. I think accepting that is part of it. But one thing I tell myself, like even if someone rejects an invitation to church or an offer to have a Bible study, I'm still going to act normal. And I think we sometimes feel weird, so we start acting weird, or we back off, or like, oh, they think I'm weird now because they said no to my invitation. I try to tell myself I'm going to keep acting normal, and we're going to be friends, and I'm going to be cool, and I'm going to show love. And if they want to back away from me, that's fine, but I'm not going to do that. So I just think we need to accept rejection is going to happen. What Satan wants us to do is to stop talking to people, is to let that rejection say, well, I guess I better quit. No one likes to be rejected. No one likes to be told no. But don't let yourself stop talking to people. Jesus didn't. Paul didn't. So I just think we have to accept that that's part of the process.
Yeah. And along with that, I taught the ladies' teen class like, I don't know, a month ago. Um, and what I taught on was kind of this idea of how to deal with like spiritual loss, like when someone you
Mm,
love um decides to leave Christ.
good topic.
Um, or what do you do? And but most of it was how do you deal with rejection? Because that's a lot of that is like when somebody leaves Christ, you try to talk to them and be like, hey, why don't like why are you were I saw you on fire for God like 2 years ago. What's going on? And then they reject you and be like, no, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And it was sad. But so we talked a lot about rejection, and we were in um Romans Romans 9. I taught from Romans 9,
Okay.
and I'm gonna turn there, and it's one of the points that is made towards the end of Romans 9. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that I don't think that we should ever feel bad for feeling bad. You know,
Yeah.
like when we're
I know what you
rejected,
mean.
I think that feeling anxious and scared and bad about it is normal. Like when you look at what Paul says in chapter 9, verse 3, he says that he could wish himself accursed from Christ for his brethren, for his countrymen according to the flesh. And he goes like on a long description there of those people, but like he was hurt by this.
Hurt Paul. Yeah.
It hurt him a lot, especially I think he's talking about the Jews in this context specifically, but even the Gentiles, everybody, right? It hurts. It really does when they reject us. And um
Well, let me clarify what you just said. One thing to remember is they're not really rejecting us. Like that's one thing just to keep reminding ourselves is that people are not. I don't think people are combination locks. That like if you say the perfect word, all of a sudden they'll follow the Lord. People have to decide it. Like every single person is either following God or they're not because of their own decisions. And so if they do reject it, like it's probably good to remember they're not rejecting me. Like they're rejecting the encouragement to follow God. But yeah, Romans 9 is a good example of that.
Yeah, and he gives a words of encouragement later in the passage, which is what I was wanting to read. Whenever so further down in this passage, um, he was talking about he was sad because the reason that the Jews were rejecting Christianity was because they thought that if that was true, they had this belief that if this were true, then God had gone away on their promise. That God had rejected their promise, and Paul is answers this in verse 14 and says, "What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness in God?" He says, "Certainly not." He says to Moses, "I will have mercy on whomever I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion." So then it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but of God who shows mercy. And it's what you were saying a minute ago of it's not us, right? It's God. If in the end we can't, it's not up to us whether somebody else goes to heaven. It's not up to us whether that other person, like, if that other person rejects us. It's not our responsibility at that point. It's theirs, and it's in between them and God, and
Sure.
it's God's problem at that point.
Sure.
And if we've tried our best, and I also wanted to point out, I'm not going to turn there, but Matthew 10:14 also says, Jesus says that if these people reject you, then he tells us what to do. He tells us to shake the dust off our feet and walk off. Walk off and shake the dust off your feet. Because if they will reject you, then that's their problem.
Yeah.
And
one thing that's hard about that is knowing when to do that. Because, Jesus didn't do that after his first conversation with people. At Luke 15, they're criticizing him because he's always with the tax collectors and sinners. So apparently, like, there are people who Jesus didn't just say one time, "Well, you rejected it, so I'm out." But we see Paul do that in Acts when he was really rejected. Like, people are like, "Get away from me." So I think that's maybe when we wipe the dust off our feet. If people just say, "Get away from me, I don't want you in my life," we wipe the dust off and go. But if people just don't say yes the first time, don't give up on them. So sometimes people wrestle with that passage. Don't give up on them. Don't wipe the dust off your feet yet. Just keep loving people, and hopefully their hearts will change. So that's something to keep in mind on that.
Yeah, that's true. And I also think that, like, this rejection, going back to the point to where, like, it's not bad. It's not bad to feel bad, right? Like,
we care about people. Yeah,
we care about people. What do you think? Like, how do you think we can deal with, like, the fear or anxiety that comes with this? The fear, anxiety. Like, I know we talked. Like, of course, we can't. We have to know that we're gonna be rejected. But how do we deal with this fear and this anxiety that, like, comes to, like, almost like the fear of rejection?
Right.
Like, how do we deal with that?
Right. Well, it helps me to remember that evangelism is not all on me. That God is working in their life, and it's not just what I say or do. It helps me remember that they've got to decide it, so it's not going to be my perfect. Because I think sometimes we worry that we're going to fail God somehow. Like, if we don't say the perfect things, and if they don't ask to be baptized by the end of this conversation, maybe I've failed in some. We're not failing God by having these conversations. They're never going to be perfect. We're never going to know the perfect thing to say. But we do it out of love for God, love for people. And just remembering, again, it's not manipulation. You're not trying to get someone to accept something they don't want. Like, you're encouraging, that helps me. That takes the anxiety away. I'm not trying to force them to do anything because I can't. They got to decide it. And so it's never me they're rejecting. It's never my perfect words that make it happen or my imperfect words that don't. And that helps me. It also helps me too. Even Paul had some fears sometimes. In Acts 18, Paul's in Corinth, and Jesus appears to him and says, "Do not be afraid any longer." So that helps me because Paul seems completely fearless to me a lot. But God says, even Paul needed to hear, "Hey, don't be scared any longer." So fear is natural because we don't know how people are going to react. But if we can just remember, we're not trying to force people to believe stuff that they don't want to. They got to decide it. It's not just up to me. They got to decide it. I think that helps with fear and anxiety.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with, like, that definitely helps me looking at passages like that. Like, I remember that one thing that helped me get over anxiety for the most part was learning that Jesus had anxiety,
Hmm.
learning that Jesus dealt with it in Gethsemane, where it says that some translation even translated as he was so anxious and he was scared. That helps me, knowing that even Jesus had a fear,
Yeah,
had an anxiety,
yeah.
and in the garden, and that just helps me. And
Well, do you ever have that anxiety of like you worry you're going to say the wrong thing and maybe subconsciously think you're going to fail God? Because I think
yeah,
Christians wrestle with that sometimes.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely think I have failed God before with that.
Well, so that's what I would say. Is that really failing God? I don't think so. I think, I mean, none of us know all the answers. And think about 1 Peter 3:15, where he says, "Be ready to give a reason for the hope that's in you." I think I used to read that verse as I need to know every answer for every question that will ever be asked. That's just not possible. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying when you are asked a reason for the hope that's in you, you be ready to give it, to be able to share why you're a Christian. And so we need to be able to share why we are Christians. But I don't think we fail God if we don't know all the answers, because sometimes we don't. So I think even just talking about it with people stirs up their thoughts, even if we're not perfect. So I guess in my mind, I hope I'm right on this. I don't think you're failing God if you don't have all the right answers. I think just having the conversation, God works through that. And that takes some stress off because it's not, again, you're not trying to win a debate. You're not trying to put the person in their place. You're not trying to be the dictionary of all the answers. You're just trying to encourage people to follow Jesus. And hopefully they've got to make their own decision on that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tim, for being on the
Thank
episode
you for the
today,
respect.
for being on the show today. It was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks
You're
for letting me come.
Very, very smart man.
You're always fun. Well, thank you for the compliment. You're always fun to talk to. I love your love for evangelism. Hope you never lose it. And I've enjoyed it. It's been good. It's been good.
Hey y'all, thank y'all for watching this Steep today. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to know when we're releasing new content. And also, we always encourage civil and healthy discussion in the comments section. And if you have a question about anything you heard today or about Great Oaks in general, please click the link in the description, or you can comment and we'll try our best to get back to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.